Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank everybody once again for joining us for the second in a three-part series. Yesterday was the marketing plan basics. Today is the action plan basics. And tomorrow is the project management basics. What we're going to cover today, as we did yesterday, are just the basics. And I'm going to give you some tools and some ideas to use when you're executing a plan and you're trying to develop an action plan on any of your projects. Like yesterday, 30 minutes. 30 to 40 minutes, we can have a few Q&A, a few question and answers, and then afterwards I'll stick around for a while and answer any questions that you may have. The interesting thing about an action plan is it's something, this is going to look very logical, and it's going to look very common sense, like a common sense approach. But I think what you're going to find is that when we go after action plans, either for events or for bigger items, that we don't always follow the basics. And this is why things fall through the gap. I'm a big fan of action planning. I'm a big fan of using it, which I'm going to show you a tool in Excel, or using Excel as a tool in order to follow projects and to manage projects, especially in the action plan section. So here's what we're going to talk about today. First thing we're going to talk about is why you need an action plan. A lot of people will tell you, I got it, it's not a big project, it's not a big activity, I don't need an action plan, got it all right here, mine like a steel trap. But that's not the best way to go. Then we're going to walk through the actual action plan items, from the summary, task definition, creating action steps, prioritization, collaboration, and how you close a project. If you have an action plan layout and written with these headers, you're going to cover just about everything you need to get a project from start to finish from an action item perspective. Again, this is not project management, how to manage that project. It's how to manage the action plan and how to execute and how to deliver on an action plan. So real quick, one of my favorite stories is Alice in Wonderland. Who has not read Alice in Wonderland, or at least know what it is? And so why do you need an action plan? There's an exchange between Alice and the Cheshire Cat, which I think illustrates it well. Alice says, hey, I wonder if you can help me find my way. And the Cheshire Cat says, well, it depends on where you want to go. Alice starts to finish, she doesn't get it all the way through. Well, it doesn't really matter as long as, well, if it doesn't matter, then it really doesn't matter which way you go. And that's kind of the approach that we take on action plans. We really know that we want something to get accomplished, but it really doesn't matter to us how we get there. We don't think about it. We don't want to think about where we want to go with the project. We just tend to put our ears back and go. And that's where problems happen, and that's where things fall short. So whether you're doing a marketing plan that we talked about yesterday, and a marketing plan is something that we want to produce to find, develop, and profit from opportunities, or a business plan, and there's business plans for various reasons, launching, sustaining a business, or raising capital, or an event, a one-time short duration activity that we want to get from point A to point B, each one of these would generate a need for an action plan. So think about this for your organization. If you're an on-campus organization, you've got a marketing plan, the way you're trying to draw people in. You will need an action plan to execute your marketing plan. Some of our students I know are starting businesses, and if you are launching a business or sustaining a business, raising capital, you will need an action plan for how you go about that. You'll also need an action plan for an event. We're going to focus today, for the sake of time, on the event, a one-time short duration activity that needs to be accomplished over a number of days or a number of weeks or a number of months. And I'm going to walk you through how that occurs. Now remember when I talked about, as we go through, I talked about the different activities that we're going to have. I'm going to walk through the summary, task identification, and all that as we go through. And what we're going to talk about in each of these is what has to happen in those subject headings. So a summary at the time of your action plan. And here's the thing about an action plan we're going to talk about when we get down to collaboration. This assumes that there are more people than just you involved in the plan, in the action itself. More than one people, we've got to do one thing. We've got to have a summary so everybody's on the same page that defines the event. And remember, one-time event. If you're defining a marketing plan or a marketing strategy, that's going to be contained in that business plan as well. We're going to create objectives in that summary. If you were here yesterday, the SMART objectives. If we're going to talk about the dates, a beginning, ending date. We're also going to talk about the readers, make sure the readers know what success looks like. If you don't get these points in the summary, your team is not going to be on the same page. Here's an example. ABC will host a dance-a-thon fundraiser to benefit XYZ. on February 1st, 2013. The objectives are 60 dance couple participants, $6,000 in donations, attract 250 people to watch the event, increase awareness of XYZ. There's one little caveat in here that might be a problem. One of the things in SMART is M, which is measurable. Are these objectives measurable? Are these 4 objectives measurable? Are all of them measurable? Now this is pretty easy to measure. 60, we can count that. 6,000, we can actually count those dollars. We can attract 250 people. Yes, that's measurable. How about increase awareness under this? Is it measurable? Maybe, maybe not. How do I know whether I've increased awareness? Well, in this case, what I would suggest is this 250 people that are already associated with either A, B, C, or XYZ, are these new people? You can actually count people, and if you have new people into an organization, that can increase awareness. I know a lot of our students want to do things that increase awareness to a cause, to an event, and there's not necessarily a hard number to it. Increase in awareness is measurable if you associate it with who in your audience is coming. So don't look at all objectives that look on first glance as soft objectives or non-measurable. Make sure you take a little deeper dive and see that they are actually measurable. In this case, awareness increase is measurable if we know who's coming to our event. And for students, because we now have scanners and we can click in who's coming into an event or not, you can actually measure that pretty easily from an awareness standpoint. Okay, once we have our summary, we need to move down to something else. We need to talk about task definition. This is really a challenge for most organizations because we stop short of identifying all the tasks that need to take place. In this case, you got to just identify what needs to be done. It's no more difficult than that. And I'm going to give you an example. If we're talking about the dance-a-thon, we need to do a couple of things. We need to reserve a room, obtain approval, we need to recruit a DJ, we need to hire a DJ, we need to recruit dance teams, and etc. We have all these things we've got to do. And we've also got to do it in a way that captures a number of different constituents. And in this case, I'm going to suggest brainstorming. And there's a number of brainstorming techniques, and we're not going to go through them in here. But there's one that's called idea generation. And through an idea generator, you get multiple people in a room with multiple ideas in a very, very short period of time. And what I'm going to offer is if any of you at any point would like to understand how an idea generator works from a brainstorming perspective, we can help you with that. Students, we can have workshops on that. If you've gone through any of our summer institutes, you can generate, and I'm talking large amounts of ideas and large amounts of activities within a very short period of time. 20 people can generate 200 ideas within about 15 minutes using this technique. So it's very powerful. But the point with this is to get every task that absolutely has to be done or that may need to be done out in the open. And you've got to do it with your team. Let me show you something real quick. Okay, this is an Excel spreadsheet that is a dance-a-thon task event, and it says task list down here. And this task list, I made this up of course, has everything from reserve room, obtain approval, design invitations, all the way down to rent the sound system, hire the DJ, rent the lighting, do we have an announcer. Things about tasks lists that seem to get overlooked is who are you assigning it to? In this case, there's an assignment in column B of the person. We're going to talk about priority in a second. There's a due date, which is absolutely critical. When is the task due? And then there's a mechanism for deciding whether something's on track or not. It's very simple. Red, yellow, green. Red means stop, we got a problem. Yellow, there's a cautionary. And then green, we're pretty much good to go. Everything's on time. And then I suggest putting notes or some comments in this as well. Let's take one real quick and take a look at a yellow. We need to obtain approval. We have to, after we reserve a room, we need to obtain approval. Bob is responsible for that. The priority is high. We're going to talk about priority in a second. The due date's on the 15th. It's yellow. Why is it yellow? Well, the administration's not sure of the liability factor. We've got to get some answers. If there's a liability involved that we can't overcome, we might not be able to do this. So it's not a red, it's not a showstopper, could be, but we just need to identify that early. One of the reasons you want to use a tool like Excel to manage this is because in a very large activity, you might have a number of events or tasks. And if you're meeting with an individual and you're trying to decide how much of the work that individual has or what they've done and you want to review the work with them, you can easily filter and come down, for example, on this. If we want to just talk to John and see what John's doing, we can pull up just John's items. John's responsible for the ordering the food, the plates, the napkins, purchasing the cups, readying the sound system, stage setup. He's got a lot of logistics that he's doing here. And if we look across and we say, okay, John, how are things going? In John's case, they're pretty good. Everything's green. So we don't have any major problems. He seems to be on task. If he's in line with the due dates, which we'll talk about in just a second again on the next tab, then we're in pretty good shape. So task management, give yourself a tool to manage tasks. Excel, I highly recommend. It's cheap, it's simple, and everyone understands, most people understand how to use the basics. We can also provide templates, these templates that we can upload as well, so that when you pull down the presentation you can, from our website, you can also look at the template. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? Task identification, managing those tasks, give yourself a tool to manage those tasks, and it includes who's doing what, the timing, and so on. When you have tasks, that sounds great, and that sounds like it's complete. Unfortunately, a lot of things that get missed on task management is action steps. Each task actually has a number of action steps that go along with it. What needs to happen to complete a particular task? That's where a lot gets lost. For example, let's take recruit dance teams. That's a task. That was a task on our last spreadsheet. It said recruit the dance teams. That's not just recruit dance teams step 1. There's a number of steps. I've got to list the potential teams. I've got to contact them either through an email or phone. I want to create, if I'm going to contact them through email, I need to create the email. I need to email the teams. I need to secure the commitment. There's a number of things to do. And again, when you're looking at action step management, Excel is a great tool. So if we go back over to our Excel sheet, and we have, I'm going to clear this assignment, this filter here. And if we have a task, such as recruit dance teams, item 11, Mary's responsible for that. It's high priority. It's due on October 30th. It's yellow. Why is it yellow? We've only got 4 teams interested so far. What were our objectives? How many teams? 60. We got an issue here. We got a short issue. So let's go over and look at the action items, or the action steps, to see what she's looking at. Mary's done a good job. She's created a list of potential teams. She's named them 1, 2, 3, and 4, and there's a male and female on each one of these. Last contacted, email, and phone number. And if we go across, the same thing. Yes, here's a phone number. Yes, no, or maybe. And what's the problem? Well, on a couple of no's, there's a date conflict. It's interesting here. We have yes, I'm willing, but I don't have a partner because my partner has a date conflict, and so on. Planning on being out of town, but might be able to reschedule, so I've got a maybe on these. What are some red flags that you're looking for if you're managing an action item? In this, we have a huge problem that's glaring that might be overlooked. I'm going to go back and see if you can help me figure this out. On the task list, we have recruit dance teams, and we have a due date of October 30th. This is what happens with most projects and most action plans. If we look at what Mary's done on her action steps from the task list, what problem do we see? Do we see any problems? Started very late. Hasn't contacted a couple of people down here at the bottom. There's not enough built-in lag time. We're going to address that when we talk about project management tomorrow. But the big thing you need to make sure on these action steps is we don't get lulled to sleep. I've only got one task to do. I've got one. If that's ever happened to you, you know what I'm talking about. The problem is, in order to complete that task, there's a number of steps that have to happen. And I wait and I don't plan those action items, those action steps in between, so I end up being late. So in this case, we're looking at probably a big issue in the fact that we missed our due date. The good news is that the due date has been set by the team itself, and we're having a dance-a-thon, we're having an event in February of next year, so October might have been ambitious, we still have time. So we still have lag time built in. We might want to adjust our dates, which is what you can do in the action steps. You can do them in the task planning. You can do it in your entire action plan. You can adjust dates. You're not bumping up against the February date, so we still could be okay. The important thing is task items does not mean that you're done. You need to have detailed action steps of how you're going to accomplish those tasks. Okay. Creating the action steps, following the tasks, absolutely critical. Prioritization is an interesting animal. When you ask people what's important, what do they say? Everything, right? Everything's important. If I didn't have the task listed, then if I had the task listed, then it's important. Well, there's an issue with prioritization. Prioritization is based on, you have to be honest with yourself and you have to be very realistic. Based on deadline, what the tasks are, the action step, the importance, number of steps remaining, you absolutely have to go high, medium, and low, or some variation of that. You have to put a prioritization on these things because your resources are going to change and be limited. The team that you create is going to have a lot of competing activities. If you don't have things prioritized, you will not know what to work on first, even if the due dates are not in alignment. What do I mean by that? Let's take a look real quickly. Let's look at our task list. The reserve the room and the obtain approval at Wofford College, students know this, rooms are a premium. They're very difficult to come by, especially large rooms for large events at different times of the year. It's a very high priority that we get approval and that we reserve the room. That's very important. It's important that we get the invitations and that we order food. Those aren't quite as high. They're not as high as the room reservations. If I'm having to move resources for one reason or another, I'm going to move them from low priority to medium priority items and from medium priorities to high priority items. A lot of this is contingency planning, and if you've ever done anything at Wofford or anywhere else, the only thing that is guaranteed is that things will not be going according to plan. It just doesn't happen that way. Something gets thrown in. So the contingency planning, the prioritization is for contingency planning. I've got a couple of low priorities here. Purchase cups. You know, it's really low priority. Hey, worst case scenario is we get bottled water instead of the cups for the water, and there's a couple of things. And again, I made this example up, but the point is prioritization, you have to make some tough choices. If you have everything high priority on here, your action plan will not work. It will fail because you will not know what hoops to jump through when you're limited or when your resources get crunched. The due date is a different story. I have early due dates. I have high priority items that are later due dates. And it's not a matter of when it's due. It's a matter of what is the priority given when it's due, given the other task items. After prioritization, we got to talk about collaboration. This is the human aspect, and this is things that absolutely break down 90% of the time. You have to engage all stakeholders, and you've got to create some type of communication channel. I'm going to show you a couple in just a second. One is the simple meeting. Get everybody in a room and let's talk about it. That's incredibly difficult with a large team with different schedules, everything from labs to other activities to obligations to social obligations. There are three things I want to talk about. Base Camp, which is a program I'm going to show you that we use here in the center, whiteboards, other meetings. Whiteboards, the reason I say whiteboards, if you walk in the room behind you, there's an idea lab. And the idea lab is a great place for collaboration and communication. You can get people in front of any whiteboard and you can start talking, you can collaborate, and you can get people on the same page very quickly with a whiteboard. Hard to capture unless you use a cell phone because it doesn't record it, but you can capture it with a picture of a cell phone and distribute it that way through email. Basecamp is a website, is a program that calendars things for you. And I'm going to just show you real quickly what we do here. We've got a bunch of different activities, and consider each one of these projects. We've got our BRICS program, conference room reservations, career services, communications, consulting. We have a consulting group, the Institute, which is our summer program, Success Initiative, Sophomore Experience, and Venture. We've got a lot of things going on. And each of these projects has an action plan. And each of these action plans has to be communicated, and collaboration has to occur with each one of them. We have 6 people in here with varying schedules, with different responsibilities and different appointments. So what we do, and I highly suggest, I was actually a skeptic of Basecamp when we first started using it. It's another piece of technology. I've got to really pay attention, but it makes it extremely easy to manage and to assign tasks. So we've already looked at tasks. We've already looked at action items. All of that can be managed a number of ways, and here's one way. This actually has our entire calendar on it, our how-tos, mail shot reminders. It's got whether we have presentations. It has a reminder for Lisa to record presentation. And then I want you to look at the to-do list that it ends up creating. One of the things we're doing is we're planning an event to happen next year. We have everything from guest lists to the presentation, activity stations, lighting, who's assigned what. There's a question mark for Richard, someone else that's going to help us through this. Photos, event rentals, and you can see that each one of these has the opportunity to assign it to someone. Here's someone, there's an estimate that I'm responsible for. This creates a to-do list. This creates emails. I get email reminders that says, Scott, remember, you're supposed to contact these people and do these things. And it's fairly automated, so the larger projects that you get going, the more it's worth it's worth taking a look at a program like this that can help you manage these large projects. So I just wanted to introduce you to Basecamp from a collaboration standpoint. The key point is here is you have to collaborate. And when you collaborate, you need to be looking at your stakeholders. And your stakeholders, you need a number of things. Again, we have another tab in my Excel spreadsheet. Talks about the stakeholders. Individual names, departments, and contact information. When we go back to our dance-a-thon, I want to highlight Officer Smith, Campus Safety, agreed to handle security. Frank, Mark, Dean Jones, Mike, Mary, all these people have to be involved in the conversation from start to finish, even if it's an FYI, a for your information type of comment. Biggest way to cause a problem, a project to fail, or action items not to get completed is not to have that collaboration. Again, you can use email, but something like Basecamp, something like a calendar, another calendar action items is the way to go. When you get done with a meeting and everything goes well, most people close up shop, they go back, they find somebody to clean up, and then they're done. They're missing a huge opportunity. You do need to celebrate. You absolutely need to celebrate a project. If you have this dance-a-thon and it goes well, send thank you notes to everybody involved. Have a little party afterwards. Go out to Papa John's and eat some breakfast early in the morning. Papa Nooks, right? Isn't that the one? Have a great time, but also do an after-action review. And an after-action review talks about what went right and what went wrong. In an after-action review, you leave titles and positions out of it. And what that means is that anyone, the lowest person on the totem pole, can question the highest person on the totem pole in a manner that's meant to make the event better. Scott, you were terrible that day. You fumbled all over your words. You didn't bring in the ice like you were supposed to. What were you thinking? And you can build in fixes for the next time. How do we adjust and make it better next time? Again, the focus is on what went right and what went wrong. We've talked about, I know as students, we've talked about constructive criticism, and we don't do a really good job of giving constructive criticism. For some reason, we're hesitant to say this was wrong. Here's how you can do it better. But we want to make sure that when we close, we don't leave that point out. So celebrate and host an after-action review. Non-technical, after-action reviews are non-technical. It's getting around a table and finding out what went right, what went wrong, how do we make it better next time. Those are the steps to developing and creating an action plan. If you take each one of those and you take the Excel sheet and you match it with one of your projects, I guarantee that you'll have a much better chance of success than if you just think, I can wing it, I can put it in my head, and I'll do it all on my own.